You'll need to hear this, because this story isn't just about rap beef. It's not about a career going cold or an artist falling off. This is about a man who made the wrong move at the exact wrong time again and again, and then had to stand in the aftermath wondering how everything collapsed. We're talking about Blac Youngsta, born Sammie Benson, raised in South Memphis. A man who came from absolutely nothing, fought his way out of the gutter, made millions, built a label, had his entire city behind him, and then, in what felt like a blink, watched it all fall apart. But here's what makes this story different from the typical rapper fell-off narrative. This isn't about the music drying up. It's not about a bad album rollout or streaming numbers dropping. Nah, Blac Youngsta's downfall runs deeper than that. It's tied to loyalty. It's tied to violence. It's tied to a murder. It's tied to the streets of Memphis, finally collecting a debt. And the wildest part? He saw it coming. The warning signs were everywhere, and he still walked straight into it. Let me break this down, because the real story about Blac Youngsta is something blogs have been dancing around for years. Today, we're laying it all out. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to the start. Back to South Memphis, one of the most violent and underserved neighborhoods in America. This is a zip code that doesn't make headlines for success stories. It only trends when somebody gets killed. That's the environment Sammie Benson grew up in. No silver spoon. No music industry connections. No famous relative opening doors. Just the streets, the grind, and a voice that sounded like gravel mixed with pure ambition. He began releasing music around 2012, dropping his first mixtape, Fast Bricks, followed by Fast Bricks 2 and Fast Bricks 3. There was no major label backing him, no big cosign, just relentless output. He moved the way Memphis rappers move, flooding the streets with project after project until the city had no choice but to pay attention. And eventually, someone did. In 2015, Youngsta released a record called Heavy. If you've never heard it, go listen. That track hits hard. It carries a raw, unfiltered intensity, the kind of song that makes you feel like you're riding through the city at 2 a.m., windows down, fearless. Yo Gotti heard it and reached out almost immediately. Within months, Blac Youngsta signed with Collective Music Group, one of the most powerful labels coming out of Memphis. Just like that. From grinding with no budget to aligning with one of the biggest names in the city, that's the street version of the American dream. And Youngsta didn't waste the opportunity. He followed up with I Swear to God in 2015, Baby Jesus in 2016, and Shake Some, building momentum with every release. He was prolific, he was consistent, and most importantly, he felt authentic. Blac Youngsta never pretended to be anything he wasn't. He was South Memphis fully and unapologetically, and South Memphis embraced him right back. By 2017, he launched his own imprint, Heavy Camp, under the CMG umbrella. He was building real infrastructure, stacking money, securing his position inside one of rap's most powerful label systems. From the outside, the future looked wide open. But that was only the beginning, because while Youngsta was rising, a storm was forming in Memphis. And whether he planned it or not, he was about to become the public face of one side of that war. Now this is where things turn complicated, and you need the full context, because without understanding this beef, nothing that follows makes sense. Around 2014, another Memphis rapper, Young Dolph, was gaining serious traction. Born Adolph Thornton Jr. in Chicago but raised in Memphis, Dolph carved his own lane completely independent. No major label, no cosign, just Paper Route Empire, his brand, his imprint, his movement. Yo Gotti attempted to sign him. Dolph declined, and that rejection planted a seed. Fast forward to 2016. Dolph released his debut studio album and titled it King of Memphis. On the surface, it was just a name. But in Memphis, where that crown carries weight, especially to Gotti and his camp, it felt personal. It sounded like a challenge, like Dolph was standing in Gotti's living room, looking him straight in the eye, and saying, "I run this city." That's when Blac Youngsta stepped in. On March 2nd, 2016, Blac Youngsta went on Instagram and came directly at Young Dolph. He called him soft, questioned his street credibility, and even claimed he wasn't really from Memphis. But what happened next pushed this beyond typical rap beef. Youngsta didn't just post online. He showed up in Dolph's neighborhood, South Memphis, with his crew. Cameras rolling. Energy is loud. It looked less like trolling and more like a challenge, like he was daring Dolph to step outside. That wasn't internet beef. That was a statement. Soon after, he released a diss track titled Shake Some. The lyrics reference Mac 11s, extended clips, and 100 rounds. He told Dolph to lay low and labeled him a fraud in his own city. The record was aggressive, high energy, and unapologetic, but it poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning. Then February 2017 happened. This is where everything turned serious. Dolph was in Charlotte, North Carolina, for a performance tied to a college basketball tournament. On February 25th, while he was inside his vehicle, it was ambushed with gunfire. More than 100 rounds were fired into the SUV. Over 100 shots. Witnesses reported hearing rapid gunfire, and nearby surveillance footage captured someone fleeing from a vehicle. The only reason young Dolph survived that day was because his SUV was bulletproof. Without it, the story likely ends there. Blac Youngsta, along with 2 other men, was later arrested in connection with the shooting. He faced 6 felony counts of discharging a weapon into occupied property, along with conspiracy charges. Those were serious, life-altering charges. But this is where the story takes a turn. The case eventually fell apart. Earlier that year, more than 100 bullets were fired into young Dolph's SUV. 3 months later, police connected Memphis rapper Blac Youngsta to the incident. Authorities stated that the vehicle used in the shooting had been rented in Youngsta's name. His associates later turned themselves into the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office and were each charged with 6 counts of discharging a weapon into occupied property, along with felony conspiracy. But the Charlotte District Attorney made one thing clear. There was no evidence placing Youngsta inside the vehicle that carried out the shooting. He had an alibi. He claimed he was in Durham at the time. Without direct proof, the case collapsed. Youngsta walked. Dolph survived. And somehow, Memphis kept moving. But beneath the surface, nothing was the same. The relationship between the 2 men never recovered. The gunfire in Charlotte left scars, both literal and symbolic, that no dismissed charge could erase. Dolph continued building his empire, thriving independently, reinforcing the image of the self-made king he always claimed to be. Youngsta stayed loyal to CMG, playing his role, standing firm, and keeping the pressure on. They never truly stopped orbiting each other. Even when the music slowed down, the tension never disappeared. It was the kind of rivalry where silence didn't mean peace. Real recognized real, and in Memphis, everyone knew it wasn't over. In Memphis, people could feel something wasn't really finished. On November 17th, 2021, at around 1:05 p.m., everything shifted when young Dolph arrived at Makeda's Cookies, a local bakery he often supported as part of his commitment to investing back into his community. He was known for staying connected to his city, moving through it with a sense of purpose and authenticity. While he was inside, 2 armed men entered and opened fire. Adolph Thornton Jr., known to the world as Young Dolph, was pronounced dead at 36 years old. He left behind his partner, his family, and a legacy that deeply shaped Memphis rap culture. News of the shooting spread instantly. Reports confirmed he had been inside buying cookies when he was attacked, just days before he was scheduled to take part in a Thanksgiving turkey giveaway. Officials described the incident as devastating, and the hip-hop community reacted with shock and grief. Memphis entered a period of mourning, while tributes flooded in from across the world. This wasn't just seen as a loss of a rapper. It was a loss of a figure who represented independence, ownership, and staying true to yourself without losing your roots. In the aftermath, attention began to shift toward others connected to the ongoing Memphis rap tensions, including Blac Youngsta, who went quiet for a time, and people started to notice. That silence marked the beginning of renewed speculation and rising pressure around his name. Within days of Dolph's murder, Blac Youngsta took the stage at a concert in Dallas. During that performance, he performed Shake Some, his diss track aimed at young Dolph, the same man who had just been shot and killed in his own neighborhood. The internet erupted instantly. People were stunned, even those who understood the history between the 2 men. Even those who knew Memphis, street beef runs deep. The optics were devastating. You don't perform a diss record about someone who was just murdered. That's not strategy. That's not loyalty. To many watching, it felt like something darker. But Youngsta didn't stop there. He released a song titled I'm Assuming. In the video, he's seen walking through a cemetery, eventually stopping at a gravestone. The name on it reads Thornton, young Dolph's legal last name clearly centered for the camera. The backlash was immediate and intense. Fans, peers, and artists across the industry reacted. Everyone had an opinion. The narrative formed quickly. Blac Youngsta was mocking a dead man. Whether that was his intention didn't matter. In the court of public opinion, he was judged instantly. Youngsta tried to defend himself. He went on Instagram and said he came from South Memphis, where there is no sympathy, and that he didn't care what the world thought. He insisted he wasn't going to pretend to be someone he wasn't. And on some level, you can respect a man who refuses to wear a mask. But there's a difference between being authentic and being reckless. In that moment, Youngsta didn't seem to recognize the line. What happened next would define the next phase of his career. Rumors spread quickly that Yo Gotti had quietly removed him from CMG. Blogs amplified it. Social media ran wild with it. Every outlet was reporting that even his own label couldn't defend the optics. Eventually, Yo Gotti addressed the rumors online, calling them fake news. He said Youngsta was a boss and couldn't simply be dropped. Youngsta later appeared on CMG's 2022 album Gangsta Art, which seemed to silence the speculation, at least on paper. But something had shifted. Even if the contract remained intact, the energy was different. The momentum had slowed. Much of the public goodwill he once had was gone. This is where people began connecting deeper dots. Because young Dolph's murder wasn't viewed as a random act of street violence. As the case unfolded over the next several years, prosecutors painted a picture of coordinated, premeditated action, and parts of that narrative ran through individuals tied to the broader CMG network Youngsta had been associated with throughout his career. 3 men were ultimately charged with young Dolph's murder: Cornelius Smith Jr., Justin Johnson, and Hernandez Govan. Govan's name stood out. He wasn't just a random figure. He had known ties to the CMG ecosystem and moved within those circles. According to testimony presented during the murder trial, Govan was accused of orchestrating the hit on young Dolph. Prosecutors further alleged that he acted at the direction of Anthony Big Juke Mims, Yo Gotti's brother. When Big Juke's name surfaced in court, it sent shockwaves through the hip-hop world. The prosecution's theory was clear and direct. The tension between CMG and Dolph Paper Route Empire was never just lyrical. Beneath the music were business interests, territory, and pride, and according to prosecutors, those pressures ultimately led to murder. In September 2024, one of the gunmen, Cornelius Smith Jr., took the stand and confessed. He testified that Big Juke had placed a $100,000 bounty on young Dolph and that he and Justin Johnson tracked Dolph for days, away he would be in Memphis for his annual Thanksgiving turkey giveaway, waiting for the right opportunity. Smith said they caught him at Makeda's Cookies and opened fire. On the stand, he stated, "I wasn't feeling anything at the time. I was just trying to get some money." Think about that. A man's life taken over $100,000 split between multiple people. A man who had turned down a label deal years earlier. A man whose entire brand was built on independence and staying beyond the industry's reach. Yet he was still reached. Justin Johnson was found guilty on all counts in September 2024 and sentenced to life in prison. Hernandez Govan went to trial in 2025 and was ultimately acquitted, a verdict that stunned Memphis and sent shockwaves through the culture. Now here's a question that rarely gets addressed directly. Where does Blac Youngsta fit into all of this? Let's be clear. Youngsta was never charged in connection with Dolph's 2021 murder. The individuals charged were Hernandez Govan, Justin Johnson, and Cornelius Smith Jr. There is no indictment against Blac Youngsta. That needs to be stated clearly. But the streets don't operate on indictments. They operate on proximity, association, who stood next to whom, and who was present when certain conversations happened. And Blac Youngsta had been one of the most visible figures in the CMG Dolph feud for years. The diss tracks, the Instagram threats, the Charlotte shooting arrest. All of it meant that when the full scope of Dolph's murder came into focus, Youngsta's name lingered in the background whether you wanted it there or not. People weren't only asking who pulled the trigger, they were asking who helped create the environment where pulling it felt inevitable. And that question carried his name. But the story doesn't stop there. While Youngsta was dealing with the fallout from Dolph's death and the growing weight of the murder trial, his personal life was unraveling as well. On August 18th, 2023, at a BP gas station on South Parkway East in Memphis, a man was shot and killed. Reports soon confirmed what those close to Youngsta already feared. The victim was his brother. Sit with that for a moment. No matter how tough someone appears, no matter how many diss records they've made or how untouchable they claim to be, losing your brother in your own city changes everything. And this wasn't the first time. Over the years, Youngsta lost multiple brothers to street violence. More than once, he received that devastating call. More than once, he sat in hospital rooms no one should ever have to sit in. The irony is impossible to ignore. Blac Youngsta spent years as one of the loudest voices in a feud that ultimately ended in murder. He released diss tracks and even filmed himself walking through a cemetery tied to a man who had just been killed. And while all of that was unfolding publicly, members of his own family were being claimed by the same streets he said he represented. The streets give, and the streets take, and Memphis wasn't finished taking. When news broke about his brother's death, people flooded the comments with dolphin emojis. That's how deep the resentment had grown. Regardless of where anyone stood in the feud, losing a brother should bring basic human empathy. But Youngsta had burned through so much public goodwill that, even at his lowest moment, part of the audience refused to offer it. That's the cost of the image he built. His music releases slowed. His public appearances became less frequent. The momentum shifted. This was clearly a man carrying real grief, yet the world watched with little compassion. And on top of all that emotional weight, he had long-standing legal troubles hanging over him. He wasn't navigating this chapter with a clean record. In 2019, Youngsta and 3 others were pulled over in a GMC Yukon for running a red light. Officers reported smelling marijuana and searched the vehicle, allegedly finding 3 pistols along with marijuana.